James Hagens was still available at the 7th overall pick, and the Boston Bruins could not have been happier.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Sunday, June 29th, a bonus episode for you because we have to break down the fantastic draft class that the Bruins reeled in at the NHL draft over the weekend. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. Available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're going to discuss the Bruins snagging James Hagens with the 7th overall pick at the NHL entry draft. What a win for this team. And then we'll discuss who they selected in the second round and beyond before quickly teeing up what's coming next for this team. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets for about 20 years now. So there was some uncertainty heading into the NHL draft as the Boston Bruins, we all remember, finished with top 5 odds at landing the number 1 overall pick, and then fell down to number 7 when it came to what their actual selection would be. Some bad luck there, to be sure. They had great odds at getting one of the top players in the draft. At 7, they were still expected to get a decent player, but maybe not one of the elite centers that were available. They were originally had the best odds to get around the 5th or 6th pick, 14.2% chance of getting 7th, and that's exactly where they landed. Lo and behold, as the draft unfolded, it started off pretty predictably. Matthew Schaefer going 1, Michael Misa 2, to the Islanders and Sharks, respectively. Anton Frondell went to the Chicago Blackhawks. Caleb Desnoyers went to the Utah Mammoth. Pretty standard there. But as it went to the 5th and 6th picks, this is where it got interesting. There were a lot of players, or a couple players, who had moved up in the rankings in terms of their profiles. Jake O'Brien, Brady Martin, to name those two. Porter Martone was in contention as well. As fate would have it, the Nashville Predators went with Brady Martin at 5. And then the Flyers, I fully expected them to grab James Hagens with the 6th overall pick. Instead, they went with Porter Martone, leaving the Bruins open to select James Hagens with the 7th overall pick. And the Bruins, let's be honest, may have just drafted their next cornerstone player. And the announcement came from none other than Happy Gilmore himself, which was pretty cool because we learned afterwards that James Hagens, his favorite movie was Happy Gilmore. You couldn't script it any better. A kid who grew up watching Happy Gilmore gets drafted by the Bruins by Adam Sandler himself. And the surreal moment played out on draft night as Sandler, dressed as Happy. The movie's coming out in about a month. The third person we've seen wearing that jersey, the new jersey, behind Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak. He announced the pick, and when he said Boston College, James Hagens knew when he heard his name, everything clicked. Hagens said, "It's the best spot in the world. It's a dream come true for me and my whole family. So excited to say I'm a Boston Bruin." Hagens, of course, plays for Boston College, well familiar with the city and the vibe. Attended a bunch of games, he said, last season, and it's a perfect fit for the Bruins and for the player. And the the video they showed. We didn't get to see him interact with Don Sweeney and Cam Neely, head coach Marco Sturm, right away. The whole draft setup was just awful, and that's a topic for another day. But the Bruins couldn't unmute themselves. We later saw Neely and Sweeney introduce themselves to Haggins, and Haggins was like, "Thank you so much for picking me." And for the Bruins, not just a feel-good moment. It was the best case scenario. James Hagens, as recently as January, was a consensus number 1 pick, and he fell into their lap at number 7. So you had their bad luck at the draft lottery, but you have some good luck with Hagens being overlooked by some other teams. And I mean, 1 year ago, we never would have thought that James Hagens could be a member of the Boston Bruins. Very down season for Boston, but this is a heck of a consolation prize. Sweeney said, "We're very happy that James was there. He's a guy that can help generate offensively, continue to round out his 200-foot game." And he emphasized that Hagens did not take a step back this season. He was just playing against older, tougher competition, and he was also somewhat deferring to his line mates. Gabe Perreault, Ryan Leonard, both of whom have already made their NHL debuts. Hagens still had 37 points in 37 games. No shame in the type of year he had, Sweeney said. He played on the top line of one of the best teams in the country. And there were several situations where Hagens wins the faceoff, defenseman gets it to Perreault, over to Leonard. Hagens instrumental in those plays, but the points weren't there because of how things played out. But he did lead the Team USA in goals at the World Juniors. 5 goals in that tournament, 3 of which came in big scenarios, 2 in the semis, 1 in the gold medal game, which Team USA won. And as Sweeney noted, he excelled against his peer group at every opportunity. And his production at the NTDP is among the best that's ever played there. There was a knock on him because he didn't quite produce on the same level as Macklin Celebrini or Adam Fantilli before him. But again, everywhere he's been, he's put up points. And again, there's no shame in the type of year he had. And any NHL team that knocked him for that, I mean, it's to their detriment. The Athletic gave this pick an A-, writing, "The Bruins had a clear need for high-end talent and a top center. In Hagens, they addressed both. He becomes the clear top young talent in their organization." They even compared him to William Nylander with skating and puck skills that matched the likes of Logan Cooley and Jack Hughes. Dobber Hockey admitted his year didn't meet early expectations, but they still had him ranked as the 3rd overall prospect behind Misa and Schaefer. His skill level is undeniable, and the combination of speed and shiftiness forms a toolkit that can translate to the next level. Now, the Bruins aren't going to rush him. He may return to BC for 1 more year, and if he builds some strength and becomes more assertive in tough areas, the sky is the limit with this kid. "Go out there and prove everyone who passed on me wrong," Hagens said, is his motivation here coming up. He's got a chip on his shoulder now. He wants to be a Boston Bruin, and it's a clear win for the Bruins on draft day. He fills Boston's biggest need and instantly becomes the best prospect in the system by quite a large margin. I just am ecstatic that the Bruins were able to draft James Hagens. I knew it was a possibility based on some projections. Jake O'Brien, Brady Martin, their profiles certainly rose, and I mean, Martin can thank the Florida Panthers for increasing his profile. The minute he compared himself, or people started mentioning Sam Bennett, and then Bennett won the Conn Smythe, it was clear that he was perhaps going to go a bit higher than some had originally projected. Hagens was a guy, again, who was at one time a number 1 overall pick, projected to be at the very least. And the Bruins, to get him at 7, once they fell out of the top 5, you're like, oh, they're going to get a good player, but maybe not quite an elite center. They got arguably the second best available center in the draft behind Misa, and they're laughing. Such a win for the Bruins. But they had more work to do on day 2, focusing on upside, size, and skill. And next up, we're talking about another center with top line potential in William Moore. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's so easy to use, fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. All you have to do is download the app, open it up, and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins over at FanDuel.com. All right, still buzzing over the Haggins pick, but there were quite a few other selections to be made on this day, on the Saturday anyways. The first round of the draft lasted way too long, but in round 2, Boston grabbed another center with some top 6 upside. William Moore, 51st overall, also a player from Boston College. He's a dual national from Mississauga, Ontario, who has played for the U.S. National Development Program. He had 59 points in 64 games, led Team USA in scoring at the under-18 Worlds with 11 points in 7 games. Arguably the most talented player on this year's national development team, wrote The Athletic. The Bruins see him as another potential top 2 center alongside Haggins. Amateur scouting director Ryan Nadeau said he's big, skates well, plays center, and can kill penalties. And having more and higher picks allowed the Bruins to go after offensive upside in this draft. Again, all credit to the Bruins in this draft. They made some bold picks. They made some nice picks and ones that could really infuse this. Like, this draft could infuse more talent into the pipeline than some of the previous 5 combined. Elite prospects praised Moore's ability to manipulate defenders, land look-off passes, and control play down low. He drives wide, then cuts inside for better looks. There are a couple knocks on him. He's got inconsistent compete level, average skating, no standout NHL trait. Dobber prospects called him a boom or bust prospect whose mindset will make or break him. But if you listen to him speak, he's a very mature guy, and it seems as though there's some definite potential there. Athletic had graded him as a projected to play NHL games tier kind of prospect. Average skating for the NHL, average puck skills, average hockey sense, average compete. But the appeal was, again, arguably the most talented player on the national development team. He can create. He's big. He can kill penalties, make plays down low. Moore's more of a raw tools bet here for the Bruins. The Bruins believe he could be a top 2 center in time, and they love his all situations upside. Next, the Bruins selected a bit of a reach here in Liam Pettersson at 61. A mobile left shot defenseman from Vaxjo in Sweden. The pick surprised some. It was seen as a bit of a reach, but Pettersson played well in J20 League and even got some reps at the top league over in Sweden. A highly mobile defenseman with the quickness to break the puck out and close on checks, said The Athletic. He's not flashy, and his puck skills may be a bit below average, but the Bruins see him as a top two, or sorry, competitor in time. Two-way defenseman. He's not flashy. Puck skills, again, below average, but he has good feet and above average shot mechanics. And Dobber called him a tweener who could play games if his all-around play continues to progress. So another guy projected to play NHL games and be a possibility to be a Boston Bruin at one time. Again, in the draft, there's so much that is up in the air, and beyond the top 5, 7 in the Bruins case, there's a lot of question marks. We don't know how these guys are going to shake out and how things are going to work out for some of these prospects. But again, Haggins, can't miss prospect. Moore, Pettersson, guys who should be able to graduate to the NHL level at some time. Now, the Bruins did have the 69th overall pick as well, but they traded down with the Montreal Canadiens, and Ty Anderson, 98.5, said it was like the first time in 24 years that these two teams have pulled off a trade. They got a 79th pick and then a 4th round pick, which they traded to Tampa for a 4th round pick next year. At 79, the Bruins selected Cooper Simpson, a shoot-first winger who dominated Minnesota high school hockey and had a short but effective stint with Tri-City in the USHL. 49 goals in 31 high school games. Scouts are a bit divided on this kid, though. He's an above-average skater and handler, The Athletic wrote, but inconsistent effort and tendency to stay outside are concerns. Ryan Nadeau summed it up best. They had more higher picks than usual, so it let them, again, target players with more offensive ability and upside. So Cooper Simpson, a guy that they see some skills in that will be valuable down the road. He always put pucks on net, in the net, and that's something they were looking for. A talented winger with great hands and shots needs to maybe get inside a bit more in order to be most effective. So those were the 2nd and 3rd round picks for the Bruins. We'll discuss here coming up the later round picks, overall grades for the Bruins, and then discuss what is coming up for this team over the next couple of days. All right, the Bruins had some later round picks. We may or may not hear about these guys down the road. Once you get into the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds, it's hard to project long-term where these guys will end up. But in the 4th round, at pick 100, Boston selected Vasek Blanar, a 6'4 defenseman with Czech-American roots who has been playing in Sweden. Not much was known about this guy. They didn't even have a photo to add to the social post. But he did post 21 points in 38 games for Troja Lagumbi of the J18 League, leading all defensemen, ranking 4th among skaters over in Sweden. The year before, he captained his team and tallied 38 points in 28 games. He's considered a long-term project with size, offensive instincts, and a leadership background. So, hey, why not? Nice blend of size, leadership, offensive awareness from the back end. Never a bad thing when you're looking at defensemen. 133rd pick, the Bruins added Cole Chandler, a 6'1" forward from the Shawinigan Cataracts of the QMJHL. 32 points in 64 games, but he did win gold with Team Canada at the 2024 U17 World Challenge. He profiles as a hard-working depth forward with penalty kill potential and some offensive touch. Cool. 165, the Bruins used their final pick on Kirill Yemelyanov, a Russian forward from Loko Yaroslavl. Scored 13 goals, 10 assists in 35 MHL games. top 6 on his team, showed flashes of offensive creativity. The Athletic noted he's a good skater with solid hands and transition ability, but it's unclear what his NHL role would be. Still, he ticks a lot of boxes and could surprise if his off-puck game rounds out. So from Haggins to Yemelyanov, the Bruins used their most well-stocked draft in years to target offensive upside and center depth, a major need in their prospect pool, and the Athletic gave the overall class a solid B. If Haggins becomes the top-line center the Bruins believe he can be, this draft could become a major turning point for this franchise. Moore offers middle six upside. Pettersson could play some games. Simpson and Yemelyanov are pure upside swings. And as Fluto Shinzawa wrote, skill and offensive potential are commodities the Bruins' pipeline was drastically lacking, and they took a good step forward addressing this shortcoming. Rachel Dory of ESPN gave the Bruins an A on their overall draft class, and she wrote, the Bruins were the beneficiaries of some interesting decisions at the top of the draft and managed to secure their top line center for the future and the third best player in the draft in James Hagens. The Bruins have needed help up the middle for a few years, and Hagens is not far off from becoming an NHL star. He was one of the most valuable picks in the draft simply because players with his talent and skill aren't available at 7 very often. Following that up by drafting Will Moore and Cooper Simpson were value picks in their range. Both have legitimate NHL upside. Will take a bit longer to get to the NHL, but Rachel rating, like Boston's accumulation of talent in the draft, and those two as well as Liam Pettersson on the back end. There's a fair chance Boston gets 4 NHL players from this draft, including one potential star on their top line. I mean, that's so much more than what you can ask for from a draft. Like, to get 4 potential NHLers from one draft is unbelievable. The Score wrote, the Bruins overhauled their center depth by snagging Haggins and Moore. Haggins was the projected top pick entering the draft cycle and still has first-line potential with speed and intelligence. Massive win for the Bruins for him to fall to number 7. Moore's great value in the back half of the second round after a near point-per-game campaign with the national program. The Bruins, to get A, B grades at the NHL draft, like, this is unheard of in the Don Sweeney era. And it's something to celebrate. Let's be honest. The Bruins have routinely, even last year, not taking necessarily the best available player in Dean Letourneau, a guy like Liam Greentree, popping off in the OHL after the Bruins took Dean Letourneau instead. Like, that didn't have to happen. And yet, here they are a year later getting A grades from a lot of draft experts. And the Bruins did so well at this draft, thanks in part to some decision-making on other teams' parts. You would not have thought, even a couple years ago, that Porter Martone, Brady Martin, perhaps even Caleb Desnoyers or Anton Frondel would have been selected over a guy like James Hagens. But here we are, and could not be more excited for the future of the Boston Bruins because of the presence of even just James Hagens, not to mention the rest of the draft class. Now, Hagens likely going back to BC for this year. He will be at development camp beginning on Monday, and outside chance that he could play for the Bruins this season, but it's most likely he will be back for one more year where he could very well challenge for the Hobey Baker Award. Now, the Bruins did not go for any right-hand defensemen in the draft or goaltending, and both of those positions are very thin right now, depth-wise. Will that be something that they address come free agency or in trades? Quite possible. And they do have a bunch of RFAs. They do have some of their own UFAs to sign. Free agency begins on Tuesday. And on tomorrow's podcast, we will kind of update where the Bruins stand ahead of free agency, what their needs are, who they could sign, which of their own players they may re-sign or let go. Qualifying offers due on Monday as well. So there could be some guys who are not qualified and allowed to walk. It's going to be a very interesting week for the Boston Bruins. On top of development camp, which begins Monday at Warrior Ice Arena. All the guys drafted are expected to be there, so that's something we will be keeping an eye on here as well as the week progresses. But the big takeaway from this year's NHL draft for the Boston Bruins is that they walked away with something they've been missing for years: real offensive upside and the potential foundation of a new core down the middle. James Hagens is the headline, and rightfully so, but Don Sweeney and his staff used this draft to swing for skill at every level. Now it's about development, patience, seeing who rises to the top. One thing is for sure, though, there's finally some exciting young talent worth watching in black and gold again. For the team to turn things around quickly at the NHL level, they'll need more from some of the young guys that are already in the pipeline that need to step up, like a Matt Patra. Mason Lohrei needs to make some strides defensively. We'll see who else could step up. Maybe Fabian Lysell, finally, after being a first-round pick 4 years ago. These are things we'll discuss here coming up through the summer. And on tomorrow's podcast, we'll do a free agent recap, where the Bruins are, what they could be looking at ahead of Tuesday when free agency begins, as well as some potential trades they could pull off in the meantime. For now, that's it for today's episode. The Bruins getting high grades for their NHL draft elite prospects, giving them an A as well. James Hagens was their number 4 prospect. He fell to number 7. And overall, the Bruins did a great job. Even if this draft only has a couple hits, the fact that they drafted for offensive upside and took some swings on some players who could hit is a good sign for the Bruins. They did not make many safe, defensive, boring picks here. They went for it, and it should pay off down the road, and as soon as hopefully next season at the very latest for James Hagens. All right, that's it for today's episode, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube if you have not already. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.